For the past few weeks, we have been diving into the greatest sermon ever preached, the Sermon on the Mount. Particularly, we're looking at the Beatitudes, the very first part. And while I was preparing for the lesson this week, I came across a quote from a man named Robert Cole. And he said, all of the writings on ethics over the past 2,000 years are simply footnotes to the Sermon on the Mount. And I was like, whoa. And then I was like, wait, who's Robert Cole? Well, I did a little research, went down a rabbit hole, as I find myself doing way more often than I probably should. But he's a psychology professor at Harvard, and he is the chair of social ethics there. And he won a Pulitzer Prize, and President Bush awarded him a Humanities Medal. And that's because President Bush couldn't give him a second Medal of Freedom because he'd already got one of those from President Clinton, which, if you didn't know, the Medal of Freedom is the highest honor a civilian can get from the government. It's like, oh, okay, he's somebody. But before he earned all of those well-deserved praises and accolades, he experienced something that hopefully will kind of help us understand the Beatitude we're going to be looking at today. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. In 1960, Robert was living in New Orleans. And he already had his degree in psychology, but he was getting advanced training in psychiatry. And one day he's driving, and he sees this giant crowd, this mob, waving flags, yelling and shouting, and he's wondering what is going on. And so he parks his car, goes, and he sees they're all in front of a school with a bunch of policemen. And all of these grown adults are united in their hatred for one thing, one person, Ruby Bridges. Ruby Bridges was the first black child to be integrated into an all-white school. And Robert sees this, and he's moved by her confidence, her boldness. She doesn't hesitate. She doesn't walk out of this school timid. She's not holding any of those U.S. Marshals' hands. She's got her school bag. And he sees this, and he goes, you know what? I want to offer my services to them. As a psychiatrist, she's going to need to probably talk about these experiences. And so he went to the Bridges family, and he went to her teacher, which, by the way, it was specifically her teacher because she was taught by herself, and said, hey, I want to just be there as a voice to talk with you guys and work through maybe some of these experiences you're having. Well, the interesting thing is as the time went on, and as he thought he was going to be helping her process her emotions, their conversations went deeper and deeper and deeper. And Robert was constantly surprised, and to the point where he said, one day she told me she felt sorry for these people trying to kill her. And Robert goes, you feel sorry for them? And she just looked at him and said, well, don't you think they need feeling sorry for? I went down this rabbit hole because of what he said about the Sermon on the Mount. And today's message is actually going to be filled with examples of meekness, because sometimes it's not just enough to talk about and describe the characteristics. Sometimes we need to visualize it, see how people responded against all worldly logic, against all odds, to embody these characteristics, and in this case, meekness. When we look at the Beatitudes, we need to remember that this wasn't just a regular sermon. This was King Jesus stepping up to the mic and telling everyone the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And if you want to be a citizen of this kingdom, here are some characteristics you're going to need to embody. And so, as I've mentioned, we're going to be reading the entirety of the Beatitudes, Matthew 5, 1 through 12, every week so we can write these words on our hearts. And I truly mean that. I've been saying that, but here, I took a page out of Alicia's book. She doesn't know this. Every time we do a new Beatitude, I'm going to take out some words from it. And I'm not going to say, you guys are on your own. You can cheat. You can turn to Matthew 5 if you want, but I'm going to leave it up to you guys to fill in the blanks, and I'll do the rest. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, blessed are the... Nice. Oh, you guys got this. And for theirs is the... All right. Next one. Blessed are those who... For they shall be... Man, I didn't hear a wrong answer at all. Great. I'll take the rest. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. So again, today we're going to try to figure out what Jesus meant. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed, happy, joyful are the meek. And so what the first two did, it make you go, that didn't mean what I thought it meant. This one definitely probably has you going, wait a second. The meek? And what are they going to get, Jesus? The earth? So they're going to experience these blessings now? If someone were to describe your life right now, people that actually know you, that work with you, that spend time with you, that see you at your best and your worst and everywhere in between, would they look at you and go, that guy, meek. I can tell you guys the truth. I don't think anyone's ever come up to me and be like, Dave, you are just so meek. And to be honest, if someone had said it before I studied for this lesson, I don't know if I would have taken that as a compliment. Again, it just kind of goes to show how poor our, maybe just my, understanding of meekness, of what meekness is, what Jesus was talking about when he said, blessed are the meek. Does he mean someone that's passive, someone that's walking on eggshells in every room they enter? Another one of these stories that I've come across that just really is a powerful one on meekness is in the 1930s in Detroit, which again, no coincidence to the fact that they're playing today or that most of us want them to win. Sorry, Mark. But in Detroit in the 1930s, late 1930s, there's these three white guys and they're on a bus. This black guy gets on and he goes to the back, as that was how it went. Well, as he's walking on, they start chirping at him. They start hurling insults at him. They don't stop. His whole route, they don't stop. He gets to his spot, and they notice he's a little bit bigger than them, but there's three of them. So his stop comes, he stands up, and as he's walking close to him, he puts his hand in his pocket. They're all getting ready, and he pulls out a piece of paper, a business card, and he hands it to one of the guys, and he gets off the bus and just keeps on going. And they're like, whew, yeah, that's right. What does that piece of paper say? Had three words on it. Joe Louis, boxer. They had just tried to pick a fight with the man who was the heavyweight champion of the world. And according to the IBO, the International Boxing Organization, the best boxer of all time, second is Muhammad Ali. Undefeated. Number one. What a rad business card. Elders, I'm going to talk to you later. I want David Scott, preacher. But secondly, unbeknownst to these three idiots, they just were mocking the heavyweight champion of the world. What does meekness mean? Well, Brother Joe teaches us a lot here. Here is a man of immense power and skill, capable of defending his honor with a single devastating blow. A man who won 25 consecutive matches from the 1930s almost to 1950, which is, for those that don't know boxing, that is unreal. Yet he chooses to forego his status and hold his power for others, in this case, three very lucky dudes. Joe's meekness was embodied here, and he inherited the earth from a boxing standpoint. What is meek? I want to drive these points home. So, meek is not weak. I love when I rhyme. You guys love when I rhyme. So, meek is not weak. It's unfortunate that it rhymes, kind of, because we put those two together. Joe hearing these slurs and insults, sitting there with tremendous power to put a stop to it. Easily. He easily could have. By not doing that, it didn't diminish his power. In fact, it maximized his power. When he got up the bus, these three clowns realized who he actually was, and oh my goodness, power under control. The word in the original Greek is praus, and it's reining in a wild stallion, or in other cases, a war horse with a bit and bridle. Bridle? Thank you. I knew you guys knew it. This is the horse choosing to submit to authority. Aristotle said that a prouse person is one who has the virtue to be in the middle of two extremes, and those extremes were recklessness and cowardice. For example, a meek person doesn't shy away from taking a stand. Rather, the stand is taken at the right time with the right people in the right way. He or she submits or constrains power for the greater effect on self and others. That's meekness. It's power under constraint. Joe Lewis is a great example of that, but the greatest is Jesus Christ. Easily, the greatest is Jesus Christ. He had the most power of any man to ever walk the earth. There was no greater power than what Jesus had at his disposal. He had the power over illness and disease, and he proved that by healing the sick. He had power over evil, and he proved that by casting out demons. He had power over nature, proved that when he could calm the storm. And he had power over death when he walked out the grave. Over and over and over again. Jeremiah 10:12. It is he who made the earth by his power, who established the world by his wisdom, and by his understanding he has stretched out the heavens. O Lord God, behold, you yourself have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and by your outstretched arm. Nothing is too difficult for you. Great is our Lord and abundant in strength. His understanding is infinite. Well, and since Jesus is God too, he has access to this power. In fact, he tells us this. Matthew 28:18, Jesus came up and spoke to them saying, all authority, some translations read power. All power in heaven and on earth has been given to me. But at the same time, if you remember last week, we read in Matthew 11, he calls himself meek. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Jesus describes himself as meek, but at the same time, he was the most powerful man to ever walk the earth. Meek is not weak. Meek is power under control. One of my favorite examples of Jesus teaching meekness comes at the expense of one of the disciples. And we're going to try to unpack this mystery and figure out which one it is. I don't want to spoil the surprise. But this recording is of Jesus being arrested in the garden. It's recorded in all 4 Gospels. So we'll start with Matthew and work our way down. Matthew, then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus, reached and drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus said, put your sword back into its place, for all those who take up the sword will perish by the sword. All right, well, what does Mark say? Maybe you can help us. And they laid hands on him and arrested him. But one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. Oh, the mystery deepens. Luke records, when those who were around him saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? One of them didn't wait. And one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his right ear, but Jesus responded and said, stop, no more of this. And he touched his ear and healed him. I've mentioned before, one of my favorite kind of things that you can pick up and read between the lines is there's kind of like a rivalry, or like, I don't know exactly what's going on between John and Peter. When the apostles found out that the grave was empty, John records in one verse that he beat Peter to the grave. Not once, not twice, 3 times in one verse, John lets everybody know, hey, I beat Peter to the grave. So maybe John can shed some light on which disciple this was. Then Simon Peter, narc, since he had a sword, or he just happened to have it, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear, and the slave's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, put the sword into the sheath. The cup which the Father has given me, am I not to drink it? Poor Peter, this guy getting dunked on all the time. He is the everyman. And I feel like Jesus had just exhibited such patience and such meekness with Peter on a personal level. You know, Jesus tells him, and I have to imagine he kind of tells him like Mark sometimes when he tells me something serious. He does this glasses down thing and he looks over him. Peter, Okay, when someone strikes you, give them the other cheek. Peter, are you listening, Peter? This is going to be important later. And what does Peter do? And I have to imagine he's not a swordsman, so he's probably trying to chop off this dude's head. Cut it off. And he just missed. I love Matthew's capturing of Jesus' response to what Peter's done here. Matthew says, do you think, and maybe there's a pause there or not, but I like to think, do you think, like, are you thinking that I cannot appeal to my Father and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? How then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say that it must happen in this way? Just, for conversion's sake, in the Old Testament, one angel was able to wipe out an army of 180,000. So it's at least 180,000. He has legions of angels. Meek is not weak. It's power under control. On this mount, in this sermon, he declared, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And then every step Jesus took, every encounter he ever had, he exampled it. Jesus says, you want to know what meekness looks like in public? I'll show you. Just watch. So we kind of starting to get this understanding of, okay, this is what meekness looks like. It's power and control. And I want to ask you, is your power under control? Is your power under the control of Christ? And at first thought, you might say, well, David, I don't have any power. And I go, up. But you do. In reality, every single one of us has power. Or have we forgotten that we're all created in the image of God? That's all I need to prove that. But I'm sure if we took a closer look at your life, we would find examples of where you have power. My kids do Taekwondo. And usually I just sit on the sidelines and watch and encourage them or take videos. But sometimes they let me get involved, which is fun for me and sometimes embarrassing for me, usually embarrassing. And my kids especially enjoy when I do the obstacle course, because they're flying through this thing and I am hugging onto stuff for dear life, trying not to fall. One of the days, the kids were breaking boards, which, if you're like me, that is the coolest part of Taekwondo by far. And Noah is struggling to break this board. He really is. And I'm trying to give him encouragement from, outside the mat. And the instructor goes, hey, Dave, get over here, man. So I take off my shoes. I'm so excited. I bow, and he's like, you think you can break this board? And I'm like, oh, man, I grew up on the Karate Kid. I grew up on Ninja Turtles. It's my time. It's time. It's finally here. And he gives me a few pointers, and he asks Noah, do you think your dad can break this board? And Noah has seen me do the obstacle course, and he's like, nope. No way. Not my dad. You guys are probably thinking I hurt myself. I crushed that board, one shot, karate right through it. We have it in the garage. I'm so proud of it. The very next board that Noah got, he broke. Now you're looking, well, what's the point of that story, David? Where's the meekness? Well, it's not me. It's not Noah. It was the instructor. His name's Master Chris. He could have broken 7 boards to show us that it's possible. I'm pretty sure that he could fly across the entire dojo and break a board. He's incredible. But instead, what he did is he took someone that Noah looked at as an out-of-shape dad who can't do the obstacle course and said, watch. He has power. You have dominion, power over stuff, power over people, maybe a bunch of people, maybe one person. But you have power, so do I. And it's actually really unhelpful when we downplay our power. A better question to ask is this: is your power under control of Jesus Christ? And does your wife agree? That's just for me. When was the last time you encountered someone that modeled meekness in this biblical definition? Think about someone that has a ton of power, but you've seen them place that power under control. For me, it was Master Chris, And in other instances, I do Bible studies with Tommy and with Mark, and I have been studying with them for a year. I can't tell you the amount of dumb questions I've asked, but never once have they made me feel stupid. Their wisdom and knowledge very easily could lead them to do that to me, but they never, ever have. And I feel far too often we associate meekness with just a physical approach, this physical power. The wise and knowledgeable people in the world have to embody weakness and have to control themselves, put their power under control far more often than the strong do. Far more often. Unless you are hanging out with the Apostle Peter, you probably don't get into too many skirmishes, too many physical, altercations. But how often are you around someone where they are just going off the rails and you're just like, I don't want anything to do with this. I want to distance myself. Maybe say something on the way out. Tony Dungy is another really cool, successful, since we're on the football theme. He's a famous NFL coach. He was a player. And at the beginning of every season, he would gather all of his players in a room. So just testosterone to the max. Tough, violent dudes. And when you think of a typical NFL coach, they're loud, yelling guys, red in the face, that Mike Ditka type of thing going on. Tony Dungy would bring all his guys into the room and he'd say, listen, fellas, this is the loudest I'm going to talk to you. Could Tony Dungy yell? Of course he can yell. But he chose to communicate. He chose to treat them with the respect that he felt they deserved, even though I'm sure they made plenty of mistakes. And in a football sense, he inherited the earth when he won a Super Bowl. Now let's flip it. Think about a situation where someone embodies power out of control. Power off the rails. Anyone ever experienced this before? No, just me? All right, well, this won't be helpful. Maybe it will. Maybe it was a coach, maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was a boss, or maybe it was a preacher. I'm rhyming. I'm on it. Maybe it was a spouse on the way to church this morning. Don't look at Tamara. We drove separate cars. What happens when you experience power that is out of control? How do you feel, especially when you're on the receiving end of someone who refuses to put their power under the control of Jesus? Do you seek them out? Do you want to spend more time with them? Or do you say, no, I'm good. I'm not going to put myself in that situation. Power out of control might win the argument in the moment, but if we are to believe Jesus, they won't inherit the earth. So here's your more challenging part of the sermon. Power out of control looks like someone that lashes out at others for any real or perceived wrong. It doesn't make a difference. Whether you've been truly wronged or just perceiving that you've wronged. When you lash out, you don't have meekness. Power out of control is the selfish impulses where you are concerned about only what's going on in your life. Power out of control complains. It's negative, and they'll disguise it under the idea of, well, it's constructive criticism. I'm going to tell you guys this. If criticism doesn't come with a willing heart to love and serve and fix, then it's complaining. That's just the truth of the nature. And again, the problem is summed up in one word, really. Pride. It's pride. Pride that your thoughts and your ways are more important than others. Pride that your time and energy is more important than others. Pride that says, I'm owed all this. I deserve it. It's my entitlement. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Well, that's interesting. The other things that Jesus mentions, though, they will receive comfort. They won't hunger anymore. They will receive mercy. Sure, that checks out. They will inherit the earth. I thought I wasn't supposed to be trying to gain worldly riches. I thought that that's not what we as Christians, we're supposed to store up our treasure in heaven. So what did Jesus mean when he said, for they will inherit the earth? And I thought about that, and I thought I'd ask a few people to share what they thought. I'm going to start with Curtis. What do you think?
I think relationships come up.
Yeah, Greg, what do you think?
I would agree with Curtis. I would say that meekness will demonstrate itself in relationships. If meekness to me means being mild-mannered, unassertive, lowly, humble, gentle. And I had a situation, there's a guy in my neighborhood by the name of Gary Ennis that's lived there 30 years, and I've just gotten to know him in the last year or so. He's this kind of a sad guy. He lost his wife about 8 years ago to cancer, and we struck up a conversation one day, and we talked about every subject under the sun. Somehow the conversation had to do with conspiracy theorists and science deniers. And he said to me, yeah, when I get into conversations with people like that, I just say, yeah, you want to believe that 2,000 years ago a guy rose from the dead, but you don't want to believe in empirical evidence. And I just thought, it was a pregnant pause, and I just smiled and I said, well, Gary, I'm one of those guys that believes that guy rose from the dead.
Yeah.
But I believe in science as well. Because I thought, if I get defensive, if I get aggressive, hostile, bitter, angry, negative, if I get argumentative, it's not going to demonstrate the image of Christ.
Amen.
And the way it's going now, we're going out and having coffee and just trying to show them the fruit of the Spirit, hopefully lead them to Christ someday.
Relationships. Jenny, you want to add to that?
Yeah, relationships are, that is the most important thing here on earth. And I think about the most important relationships to me is my family, is my husband and my kids. And think about what meekness looks like then in my role as wife and mom, because wives and moms have a lot of power. So there's power in our homes, and it was convicting when you talked to me about this and asked me about this. And then I thought, what does it look like then to be meek in these relationships and inherit these relationships then and grow them? And I thought about how Proverbs says that a quarrelsome wife is like a leaky roof. How if I'm quarrelsome and combative and quick to take offense and always looking for a fight with my relationships with my husband and my kids, then I'm not going to inherit. I'm not gonna grow that. But if I'm the opposite, if I'm meek and gentle, then I get to have that with them.
Exactly. People will say time is the greatest resource on earth. Well, if it's a resource, you spend it on something. What do you want to spend it on? What does everyone want to spend it on? Relationships. I can't think of anything better than what our two brothers and sisters just shared. Our relationship with God, but also our relationship with loved ones, with our spouses, our kids, our parents, our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers. You know what the interesting thing about this is? When we don't have our power under control, who does it hurt? You might be trying to overthink this. I did at first that, it's me. Yeah, but who bears the brunt of you not having your power under control? It's the ones we love the most. And that's the irony of it all. We love them the most, and our lack of meekness, our inability to get our power under control hurts them the most. Is your power under the control of Christ? Proverbs 25:28, like a city that is broken into and without walls, so is a person who has no self-control over his spirit. Those who lack self-control, who can't be meek, will be ruled by whatever issue, obstacle, emotion comes their way. The word meek, as we read, is about a stallion under control, which begs the question, who's the horse and who's the rider? We are the horses. Jesus is the rider. The first of these three Beatitudes, they all have a theme, and that they are all embodiments of humility. They are the opposite of pride. And the Hebrew word for humility, as we wrap up, is anava. And it just means occupying our God-given space in the world, not overestimating ourselves or underestimating ourselves. There is a fine balance here. In Genesis, we read the story of the Tower of Babel, and they said, oh, we want to build a tower to make it to heaven in order to make a name for ourselves. Their motivation was the opposite of anava, because they wanted to take up more than their God-given space. And we live in a world of likes and retweets and follows and all of that stuff, and it's easy to determine our self-worth based on how many or how few of those we have. Again, we underestimate ourselves. That also isn't Anava. Growing up, I feel like we're kind of been taught that humility was thinking less of yourself by taking up the smallest amount of space possible and walking on shells around to everyone. Anava is about being aware and comfortable of your place. When we do this, when we don't take up so much space that it squeezes out others, when we don't take up so little space that our responsibilities fall to others, that is Anava. So what if today we resolve to love and serve others by simply taking up the space God has given us? Nothing more, nothing less. Jesus told us to take and share his yoke. He's longing to live with us. He died a lonely, painful, heartbreaking death on a cross so you could have a relationship with God the Father. He stands at the door knocking. Doesn't matter if you've been a Christian for 60 years or if you've not even made the choice to follow Jesus Christ yet. The question will remain the same for all of us. Are you going to answer the door? Are you going to answer the door? If that's something you want to do, come talk to us. We would love nothing more than to help you prepare your heart for a place for Jesus to make his home. It's time to start living a blessed life for the rest of your life. So why don't you come as we stand and sing?